Welcome to the Tick Tock Podcast. The clock is always ticking, so let's synchronize our watches and dive in. I'm your host, Callie Brigham, and I'm here to help you make time for what matters. Hey friends, thanks for joining me in a new episode on our Tick Tock Podcast. Super quick, right before we get started, gonna do the ask. I don't ask much, do I? I really don't. If you have not yet given us a 5-star review, given us that little rating, that is the way, the number one way that more people can hear the podcast, because it is like exponential growth when you share, when you review, when you rate. Okay, that's my only ask for today. Now, on with the show. I am really looking forward to this topic today. It is somewhat familiar, it's somewhat unique, and if you like stories and good analogies that help you remember things like I do, you are going to love this episode. Now, I have to give full credit to another podcast. I'm trying to think of when I discovered this podcast. It was either pre-pandemic or right around when the pandemic started. It is called the Happiness Lab. And it is a fascinating podcast all about the psychology of happiness. So, not necessarily on the spiritual side, although they cover some of that too, but it's really more the psychological side of what makes people happy and what makes people unhappy. So, all of the neurons and the circumstances and the decisions, the choices, you name it. And if you have studied anything about this, then you will know that there are pretty validated statistics that share that happiness is not predominantly circumstances. Happiness is also not necessarily genetics, although both of those play into it. They really do. Some people are just born glass half full. Some people are just born glass half empty. Some people are born glass totally full because it's 50% air, 50% water, right? Okay. But it really is a choice. So, anyways, I am totally off on a tangent, but a lot of the content that I'm going to share today comes from that podcast. So, I have to give full credit to the Happiness Project podcast because I think it is super insightful. Okay, so what in the world does happiness have to do with time and our schedule? What are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the word subtraction or subtract. That's right. We're going to take some things away today as it relates to our time, energy, and emotions, our schedule, etc. Now, because of the topic of subtraction, we're really going to say today, and this hurts me to say, but I'm going to say it, less is more. Now, I mean, in some areas of my life, I just tend to be more is more. Like put one more bracelet on. I mean, I've got a lot of bracelets on today. Put one more accessory on. Let's just be extra in life, right? But that's really not what this is about today. It's about removing things, subtracting things. We've talked about this in certain ways in other podcast episodes. We had our spring cleaning episode where we were spring cleaning our calendar. Do you guys remember that? Where we were literally wiping everything away. That was in episode 46. So a little over 10 episodes ago, we were talking about spring cleaning that. We've talked about prioritizing. We've talked about delegation. We've talked about a lot of different things when it comes to removing things. We've talked about cradling versus juggling, one of my very favorite topics. That was, goodness, way back, I think episode 14. Hello. We've talked about boundaries. We've talked about if you're introverted or extroverted and, energy levels, the whole deal. But what we're going to do today is really hone in on making one subtraction. One subtraction. So thank you again to the Happiness Lab. I think I just said Happiness Project. That sounds like a good podcast name. Anybody want to start their own podcast? Why don't you do that one? Okay, Happiness Lab. So I'm going to give you some examples that I heard from this podcast, and we're going to relate it to how you feel how you are acting when it comes to your time management and when it comes to your schedule. So, here's just a few examples of when subtraction is the right thing to do. And I know that, again, I am recording these podcasts, doing these podcasts right in the middle of the chaos for many people of May. So maybe this is perfect timing. And maybe this is really perfect timing as we're going into the summer because our seasons are changing, which means we need to take a quick audit of what we have on our calendar and what we have going on in our to-do list because we've just have a new season, frankly. All right. So here's a couple of really interesting stories and ideas for you to kind of set in motion. So the first is there was a fella named Ryan McFarland, and he grew up around a lot of bikes, like motorbikes, bicycles, you name it. Had that engineering bent to him and also just loved bicycles, right? So, when his son was about the age that he needed to learn how to ride a bike, his brain starts to go into gear. How can I help my little guy learn how to ride a bike? Anybody remember that? You're running behind your kid. You're finally trying to let go. They're wobbling back and forth. People are crying, falling to the ground, scraping their knee, saying, "This is too hard." Or maybe that was just us with Braden. I don't know. Okay. But he can ride a bike today. That's the good news. So this fellow Ryan says, I'm kind of smart. This is sort of up my alley. What can I do? Well, he tried all different kinds of things, right? He added special pedals. The whole process was trying to add to something that was already in existence until one day, eureka, he discovered it. He figured it out. Do you know what he did? He took off the pedals. And maybe you've seen these training bikes. They're called striders or balance bikes. Really, what it's doing is allowing the feel and the sensation that kids need to start to get that equilibrium going and that balance going so they can feel what that's supposed to feel like. First, they're just kind of maneuvering the bike with their feet, which I think was actually how bikes were originated, but I don't know. I'm really not an expert on that like Ryan is. So, in essence, what happened was he now, I'm sure, has a multi-million dollar company because he realized all he needed to do was remove one thing. Another story is there was a professor of engineering at the University of Virginia. He even wrote a book about this topic. It's called Subtract: The Untapped Science of Less. He did some experiments with Legos. All right. Where are my Lego people out there? Believe it or not, my daughter is really the one that always loved Legos. She doesn't do them really anymore, but it was always my daughter, and as opposed to my son. It was also never my thing. Spatially, I don't know. My brain, like, I hate written instructions for like how to put together a shelf, or that is just not my domain. Our whole family knows that. It just looks like complete Greek to me, and my husband has to do it. Anyway, so he did some experiments with Lego. So had this sort of like Lego bridge built, but it was slightly off kilter or akimbo. I like that word, akimbo, slightly wrong. And so he was asking the students to try to solve this engineering issue with this Lego bridge. Well, for the majority of them, it really boiled down to adding Legos here, trying to level it out, trying to even it out. What they didn't realize is there was one Lego that just didn't need to be there, and it just needed to be removed. He also found it was really interesting with children. Most children immediately were able to just see, oh, that one doesn't belong there, and they take it out. It was never about adding more to try to make it make sense. It was literally about trying to just see the one thing that didn't need to be there. Hmm. Okay, I have more. Are you starting to hear the rhythm and the wisdom and maybe starting to think, I have been, whether it's trying to please people, whether it's trying to be more successful, whether it's trying to be more fulfilled, whether it's out of obligation and guilt, I have been adding to the uneven, out of whack bridge instead of taking something away, right? I've been totally out of balance trying to ride the bike of life because I've been adding to it instead of taking away. This professor also talked about recipes. So he would give out like a soup recipe and it was had a whole list of ingredients. And it was like, okay, how could you make this soup better? How could you make it taste better? How can you make and most people again would say, well, you could add in this ingredient, you could add in this protein or this vegetable or add some sour cream on top or mix in some whatever. But he said the most effective and tasty recipe of all was when people would realize, wait, those 2 ingredients don't go together. Just take that one out. Hmm. Also, another example of this would be trips. Another experiment was done with giving people an itinerary of a week-long trip in a certain place, usually a place where there's a lot for tourists to see. I kinda think about our school where my kids go to. It's a classical school, and they have an aesthetics trip. Every other year, the juniors and seniors go to Greece and Italy. And we were hearing about their trip. My kids aren't quite old enough yet. My son will go in 2 years, and we were hearing about their trip, and the kids loved it. I mean, they absolutely loved it because they study all of these things, their whole education, but they were so exhausted. They were so exhausted. So, imagine you have this trip itinerary, and I mean, it's like, okay, 5 minutes in this museum, and then you go over here. So then this was given to people to say, "All right, how would you make this trip better, more effective, more enjoyable?" And what most people did was just move things around and say, all right, well, this location actually would be better over here, etc. But the whole idea was, why don't we just remove some of these things from this trip? When my son and I went on our 2-week trip to Italy and Switzerland, yeah, it was, oh my goodness, it was the most incredible 2 weeks. We went just about almost exactly a year ago. I'm still wearing this little bracelet that I got on the streets of Rome. That is a whole long story. But when my son and I were planning the trip, my idea was, Brayden, let's pick one thing that we want to do per day. One thing. No, they were kind of bigger things like the Colosseum and Forum or whatever. One day we picked 2 because we wanted to do a night tour of ghosts and all that kind of stuff, legends and ghosts and things like that that started at 9 at night. But other than that, we planned one thing a day. My mom always says that you plan a trip somewhere as if you're gonna return to that place. I've also heard that you plan a trip not based on what everybody else says to do, but what things you like to do. So, as a matter of fact, my son's favorite thing, he said, in Rome was our cooking class. Yeah, we spent about 2 hours making ravioli and fettuccine and tiramisu, and then we sat and we ate it and we met another family and had so much fun. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, he loved seeing the Borghese Gardens and Gallery and the all the ruins but he really, really liked the cooking class. So, in essence, this epic trip might be better if you just removed something. I mean, we could talk the same thing about parenting, couldn't we? Oh my goodness, right? So many things that we have our kids involved in that we need to make sure. I mean, I'm guilty of that too, right? We want them to be successful adults. So, right now, my son's a freshman. We got to be thinking already about his ranking in his class and PSATs and all these kinds of things too, right? Do we? I don't know. One last story was an interesting one of a jazz pianist named Keith Jarrett, and really renowned, really amazing at, I think, just kind of making up all these things on the fly and just incredible musician. Well, he gets to the place that he's gonna have a huge concert, and somebody messed up and had a beat up old piano there when he was used to, of course, the most beautiful instruments you could imagine, and he was going to just cancel this concert because he can't play on that piece of junk, you know? And he decided, because he didn't want really anybody who had made the mistake to get fired or in trouble, that he would do it. It's his most renowned concert of all because he had to strip away some of the things that he could do on a finer instrument, but he really needed to simplify. And it's literally his most well known. What did you think about the stories that I just told you, from the bike to the Legos, the recipe, the trips, the parenting, the piano player? If you were forced to take away one thing in this week, maybe you weren't forced. Maybe you're like, I already know. I already know what it is. You don't even need to make me. But if that feels like, I don't know if I could pick something. If you were forced to take away something this week, what would it be? Now, remember, this is not as drastic as our spring cleaning exercise where we took everything away, a clean sweep, we took it all away, then we put things back in. This is more of something that you could do weekly or monthly, and you could maintain it. So I suppose it is like that. Was it Coco Chanel that said, look in the mirror and take one thing off? Look at your calendar and take one thing off. I know, it's kind of scary. It's sort of weird, right? But wouldn't the recipe of your week be better? Wouldn't the journey of the trip that you're going on this week be better? Would you find more balance and not spill off your bike and scrape your elbow or have a head injury be better? How about the unevenness of the bridge be better? What about the beauty of what you're experiencing and others are experiencing through you if you just took one thing away? So I just want to finish this thought with an effect that I also learned. Now, I'm not going to say it exactly the same way that I heard it, just, well, you'll hear why. So this is called the yes dang effect. Okay, you can guess that's not the actual name of it. Yes, fill in the blank. Okay, yes dang effect. Have you ever heard of that? Okay, what that means is, have you ever said yes to something, and then when it came time to do it, you said, dang it? Okay, that's the yes dang effect. So I want you to look over your schedule this week. I want you to look over your calendar this month. And I want you to say, okay, what am I getting ready to say yes to that when the day comes, I'm going to say, dang it? Or what have I already said yes to that I'm already saying, dang it? And I'm either going to know next time I'm not doing that, or maybe there's even an opportunity to now bow out graciously without ruining my integrity. Because the other effect, the flip side of that, is the no yay effect. When you say no to something, and when that time comes that you would have had to do that, you say, yay. The no yay effect. Which one? Yes, dang, or no yay. And you can even take it a step further. If you say no to something for your no yay effect, you could put that, write it actually in your calendar so that when that time comes, you could say, yay, I don't have to fill in the blank because I already said no. It's the best feeling. You could even forward that in an email to yourself, to your spouse, to your kids, to your bestie, and say, hey, I could have said yes to this, but I said no. I just want you to know, like, I want to honor our time together this weekend, or I want to honor our lunch date that we had, or I want to honor the time that we have to do like absolutely nothing together. I said no to this, and I'm saying yay to that. The yes dang effect or the no yay effect. How will that feel? Okay, so that is your little thought paradigm for today. Subtraction. Less is more. Look at a problem, look at an opportunity, look at a challenge before you. Simply look at your week at a glance and say, what is one thing that I can remove that will give me in return balance, direction? It will give beauty to my life. It will feel good. There will be a great experience. And that's the ticket, my friends. Okay, subtraction. Less is more today. God bless you. Thank you for joining me on the TikTok podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and leave a 5-star review. Your feedback fuels our mission to help you master your time. Set your alarm for our next episode, and until then, make every moment count.